As you've just heard, my name is Michael Jones, and I'm the current Executive Director of the Caribbean Communities Implementation Agency for Crime and Security. So I'm hailing from CARICOM. I'm cognizant that we're running a little bit behind time, so I promise to stick to the allocated 10 minutes. But I want to first commence my address to you by first extending our thanks and appreciation to you, Ms. Batang, and your events management team from the global startup ecosystem community for extending this opportunity to me to say a few words about our journey at CARICOM Impacts, our contributions, findings, and as you asked, offer any advice, if any, to the audience, especially within the context of tourism, technology, and talent. The theme for this year's conference is From Diaspora Engagement to Investment, Connecting to the Caribbean's Economic Future Pillars, Tourism, Technology, and Talent. This year's event focuses on galvanizing local and diaspora communities to tackle tourism workforce challenges, shortages, and technological disruptions within the region. Now, though our agency just celebrated its 15th anniversary of existence, it is not as well known as some of the others whose history predates ours. And in some instances, there are some still who were or are of the belief that our creation was for the first Cricket World Cup we hosted in the region in 2007. Yes, we did host a second World Cup, which was the T20 version in 2010, and as was our fate then, so was it again sealed yesterday when we suffered our third defeat, and so I have no chance of advancing any further in the competition. Now, while I would concede that that first World Cup was a catalyst for our creation, as the recommendation for the creation of such an entity as ours was actually one of the 130 recommendations emanated from the outputs of a security task force established in 2001, even prior to September 11th. The preparation for the hosting of the championship and strong security requirements created the impetus for the commitment required, and so security was added, and some would argue belatedly, as the fourth pillar of our regional integration efforts, those being then economic integration, foreign policy coordination, human and social development, and security. Now, it is well known and an established fact that the Caribbean is the most tourism-dependent region on the planet. In fact, Dr. Thomas D. in 2015, in a publication called The Caribbean Tourism Industry in the 21st Century, an assessment highlighted that 5 out of the top 10 countries and 12 out of the top 25 countries in terms of the value-added contribution of this industry to total GDP are Caribbean countries. And this assertion was based upon figures gleaned from the World Travel and Tourism Council. But this is stuff you already know, and my assignment was to talk to you about our contributions, findings, etc. Well, one contribution that we've been making since 2006 is the management of a regional advanced passenger information mechanism. In preparation for CWC 2007, 10 CARICOM countries would have legislated the need for the submission of advanced passenger information and did temporarily operate as a single domestic space for the duration of the competition. Given its success, this legislation that was sunset initially became permanent even though the single domestic space went away. So long before UN Security Resolution 2178 from 2014 was passed and 2396 from 2018 subsequently, which call for the requirement of collecting API and passenger name record information as a means of combating the movement of foreign terrorist fighters, this region was well ahead of many more developed countries in the world in processing this information. To date, we have all 15 member states and 2 associate members of CARICOM and 1 third state participating within this regional setup, with others to follow. Having such a mechanism in place increases facilitation of the traveler, not just the traditional tourist, without compromising security. And this is critical for a tourism product, because as we discern in a joint study that was conducted between ourselves and the Caribbean Tourism Organization in 2010, the feeling of being safe and secure was one of the key reasons why our countries were selected as destinations for travel. Given our comparative similarities of size, scarce resources, and the recognition of strength in numbers, The Pacific Immigration Development Community, which comprises members such as American Samoa, Cook Islands, Kiribati, etc., have engaged us as they seek to replicate a similar setup in their region. Now, in the year 1 BC, which is actually 2019, BC being before COVID, we were processing on average 60 million passenger movements annually across the CARICOM member states. This fell to almost a third of that number in 2020. Now, while there's no doubt that this global pandemic is a genuine crisis, having just accounted for 5 million global deaths last week, and in January 2021, in the semi-annual Global Economic Prospects report published by the World Bank, it was estimated that the world economy probably shrank by approximately 4.3% in 2020, or an estimated 6 trillion with a T capital dollars. Despite the pall, however, of these negative statistics, it has also certainly provided periods for pause, reflection, change, and creativity as we all look for ways of combating, coping, and coexisting with this nascent and novel threat. Stakeholders that were previously adamant about the submission of manual or paper-based information were less so, as we were able to implement online ED forms to some member states, establish portals for other latent or secondary stakeholders to have access to information that was otherwise not readily available to them, given the need to reduce contact interfaces to prevent the spread of the virus. Another outcome of this pandemic, or lesson learned, is that we and some of our other partners, particularly in the airline industry, have become more entrepreneurial as we and they seek to become more competitive and doing more with less to increase the value for money concept. One such way of achieving this is by disintermediation and business process re-engineering. Just two fussy terms for cutting out the middlemen and figuring out how things work and getting them to work faster or better. We have been able to do this by recruiting some young talent in the organization, some as old as 21 and 23 years old. In fact, currently within my ICT department, there's no member who is 40 years old yet. And these are the ones who aren't afraid to ask the question as to why or why not, to test systems and practices that had become routine. So, whereas before we were takers or consumers of some technologies or systems, we have used the quiet time of 2020 to transition to bespoke systems, thus reducing our reliance on external entities who control pricing and recognizing as entities reliant on member states' contributions. These will become even more scarce contributions, that is, as they all try to recover from the resultant economic crisis of this pandemic. Technology is a force multiplier, yes, but the level of application realized can be attributed to skill of our human resources, and it is at this time I would really like to pause to express my thanks to the hardworking men and women that make up the team at CARICOM Impacts. If it was at all to proffer any advice, it would be in the area of technology, and it would be that businesses need to have more cyber domain awareness and resilience, and our countries need to be more agile in ensuring that our legislative framework keeps pace with the means of doing business as we leverage technology and the Internet of Things for value creation. During this very pandemic, several businesses, such as hospitals, car dealerships, wholesalers, government entities, were all victims of ransomware attacks and/or data breaches. In 2020, Impacts completed a review of the policy and legislative frameworks governing cybersecurity within the CARIFORUM region through funding from the 11th European Development Fund. What was highlighted is that most countries feature several national laws which address some aspects of cybercrime and cybersecurity, noting, however, that there is no omnibus law that addresses all the principles and standards prescribed for the protection against transnational electronic crimes. So, in simple terms, the legislation is somewhat or mostly disjointed. There were several gaps highlighted within the national laws that create situations of ambiguity and uncertainty, and these must be addressed. While there are regional guidance and legislative documents provided by us to member states based on the same EU support, what now is required is at the member state level is action. Action in the areas of the application of harmonized policies, laws, and practices, transnational cooperation, development of effective and balanced procedures for investigation, development, cooperation, and capacity building. To this end, Impacts is facilitating these interventions with direct support through World Bank funding to 4 OECS member states to update their national cybersecurity strategies, policies, and legislation. Additionally, Impacts is currently engaging in extensive capacity building for law enforcement and judicial officers in critical areas necessary, such as cyber incidents response and digital forensics and investigative or legislative framework. As it is said, it takes a village to raise a child, which really promoting the concept of teamwork. I think it is also very important to engage the respective diaspora to ensure that we learn from them and incorporate them in our respective fights or efforts. So with those few words, ma'am, I basically want to thank you again and the promoters of this conference for this wonderful opportunity to share a little bit in the time that we were allotted. I certainly look forward to the engaging discussions to ensue today. Thank you all very much.